Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode are that of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the values of sponsors or other associated organizations. Welcome to the Parental Compass with Family Education and Support Services. I am your host, Bobby Williams. Please subscribe to the show, leave us a comment, leave us a review. We have a very interesting guest on the show today, Samantha Hinger. Samantha is an autistic advocate with the University of Washington's WA Include program. She is also a mental health and disabilities consultant with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families here in Washington State. Samantha has autism herself and is the parent of a child with autism. Along the way, she's gained a lot of knowledge about what works for her, both as an individual and as a parent. It was a really cool conversation. Check it out.
These are things that are going on with me. Like, I'm having these sensory needs. I'm having my anxiety was rooted in sensory overwhelm, and I was able to kind of label that and notice it for what it was, and then accommodate those things in a way where I was supported differently than I was before. And so over time, changing jobs and supporting my sensory needs and recognizing that I'm communicate differently and that I'm interpreting people's words differently and kind of helping accommodate those things for myself. I was able to really overcome a lot of the mental health concerns that I had had over the years and was able to live my life a lot differently, understanding that I am an autistic human and need these things to look a little differently in my life.
Your child has autism. How did you first start thinking maybe my child is autistic?
Yeah, so she's also, so she is twice exceptional in that she is gifted, she has a high IQ, and is also autistic and has ADHD as well. And I actually had to kind of tell her doctor, oh yeah, she definitely has these stereotypical, qualities of autism, just to get the referral in, even when it wasn't as noticeable. But because I was so versed in these other ways that autism can look, I was able to really advocate for her in getting that. And some of the things that stood out to me is when she was little, like, she would listen to the same songs kind of on repeat while she spun in circles in the living room. Um, she didn't line her toys up traditionally, but when she was doing pretend play, she would I have this one really vivid memory of her lining up Play-Doh canisters in a row, and then they were at home, and then she'd take them and line them up in a different place, and then they were at school, and then she'd take them. And so there was a lot of pretend play happening, which people often mistake as, not something that autistic humans do, um, which is not true. She had a lot of that, but it was in a very structured way. And if you tried to kind of impede on that structure, she would get and she still gets very, very upset when you try to change her kind of structure of play.
So, on one hand, you have your child with autism, and then you have autism. And I imagine there's specific challenges that come up there where maybe you're feeling triggered by what the child is doing. Or did you notice any of that?
Oh, yes, for sure. We trigger each other often, and it's something we just kind of try to manage. We I get very overwhelmed by noise, and she's very sensory seeking. So she loves repeating words, and she will scream when she is overwhelmed, and she will need to be as loud as humanly possible and just does not recognize that in herself. And so I've bought noise canceling earbuds and headphones over the years. I've done a lot to kind of try to mitigate those things, and also taught myself a lot of regulation skills that I just didn't have before. I didn't know I needed them.
Explain to me about how you taught your self regulation skills. That's interesting.
One thing I've noticed is that there's a lot of expectation for children to have emotional regulation skills that a lot of us adults don't even really have. So you see that a lot in parenting as yelling or, kind of this isolation where it's go to your room, um, those kinds of things, where it's kind of trying to separate everybody from the situation, but everybody's expected to kind of calm down on their own, whether or not you have the skills to do that. Right. And so um, I've had to learn a lot of co regulation where I have to try to remind myself she's young, she's still learning. And so I have to keep my body calm and take deep breaths or take a break myself for a minute and tell her we will, like, I'm not upset with you, like I just need to step away. Um, or make sure she has some of her comfort items first while I calm down. So like her blanket or stuffies or music. She has a spinning chair. So just as long as she has something to get her started while I get myself regulated. And granted, I say this like it's some easy, perfect thing that happens the right way every single time. It absolutely does not. There are times where I feel like a garbage parent and I'm like, I could have done that so much better. But we just try to do it differently every time.
Are there any like specific things? Is it just give them the items that are comforting to them, or what are tools you can teach children to self regulate?
Yeah, I think one important piece to remember is during with neurodivergence during meltdowns, it's a nervous system reaction. So it's that fight, flight, freeze kind of response that in the moment we have little to no control over. So a lot of the time, I'm just trying to kind of break that nervous system response in a way that's helpful for her. So it's really been trial and error over the years. Ice packs and sour candy are two things that I've learned can help shock the nervous system kind of out of that response so we can start over.
So explain that to me. An ice pack, and you just get them called, and they're like, "Oh," and in a different headspace, or
Yeah, so a lot of there are people, it's the same kind of effect as splashing like cold water on your face, right? Where it um kind of helps reset that nervous system response. I don't remember the actual science behind it. I've read it at one point and now I it's out of my brain. Um but usually she'll put the ice pack on her chest or her head typically, and just holding it sometimes helps just redirect that energy, I guess. The sour candy's the same. It's like that shock of sensory difference that can help kind of shift things. Um, but then it's also recognizing what helps her regulate, and really in my house I try to focus on her sensory needs. So running through like her body functions sometimes when she's escalated, like, are you too hot, or do you need to go to the bathroom, are you hungry, these things that we don't always recognize in ourselves in the moment, um, that can dysregulate us. But then also making sure those comfort items that I mentioned are also her sensory regulation tools. So she noses her blanket because that's like a sensory regulation tool for her, or she has a weighted stuffy that can be helpful. That deep pressure. Um, I'll have her push on my hands or with her hands or her feet to kind of create that deep pressure sensation as well, where we're kind of pushing against each other gently. And that's something that's helpful too. But it's really just a lot of redirection sometimes into either a preferred activity or a sensory activity that can really help break that.
I think that's interesting about doing a body check in because even as adults, sometimes, you ever have a time it's like, oh, my shoulders are stiff, and it's like, well, I'm really feeling tense right now. And when meltdowns are happening too, it can just be so hard to understand, like, what are you telling me here? Is there any way for young people to learn how to advocate for themselves better? Are there any tools around that?
I think it comes with time and modeling too. Um, I think in the moment isn't the time to teach those things. And I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated is they're trying to teach those skills in the moment and trying to teach that communication in the moment. But that modeling communication really needs to be happening during times of regulation. Um, and it builds over time so that eventually they will be able to kind of advocate and recognize that they're starting to reach those meltdown kind of feelings. But I think a lot of times, like, I don't even know exactly when I'm going to have a meltdown. It just builds so subtly in myself that I know she doesn't recognize it. So it's kind of teaching how do you even recognize that within yourself? And it's different for everybody.
A lot of parenting can be rooted in compliance. I'm the adult, I'm up here, you're the child, you're here, do what I tell you to do. But that hierarchical attitude doesn't always mesh with people with autism. Can you speak about that a little bit?
In my family, for sure, in my experience and what I see in my child, but also what I've heard from others in the autistic community as well, is we really have a hard time seeing that hierarchy and seeing, people in positions of power as something other than equal to us. Like, we are much more, it's hierarchy is a societal construct. So for us, it's more, we are all human beings. We're all equal on that playing field. And I definitely see that in my child, where it doesn't really matter that we are adults. She doesn't view us as unequal parties. We are both human beings. Um, and so we don't, I think compliance can be dangerous. Um, Teaching kids to comply without fully understanding the reason why, or just comply to adults in general, can be really harmful. There are adults out there that you don't want your children to listen to. Um, so it's really teaching her from a young age that critical thinking and making sure she understands why rules are in place and why these things are important. Because we really do need that buy-in and an understanding of why things are important to be able to follow them. They have to make sense. Um, and so we just allow her as much autonomy and control over her environment as makes sense and as is safe for her. I think one thing I've told her repeatedly over the years is that my job is to keep her safe and healthy until she's able to do that on her own. And so she will argue sometimes that she is able to do that on her own, but we will have more conversation about it. And typically, as long as she understands, then we are in agreement and can move forward. And then sometimes I have to say, hey, you're being unsafe. I have to move your body now. I'm sorry.
I assume that's met with screams in response sometimes.
Oftentimes, yes, yeah. But then once she's calm, we're able to kind of work through it.
Speak to me about how flexibility is important.
That flexibility is important to help give her the autonomy and control to be able to learn these skills. Um, that she's still learning and understanding that she is still young. Like these things, you're not just born with these skills. And I think that that's something societally we kind of expect of children when a lot of times adults don't have them. And so I just think about, well, how do I want people to be flexible with me? I just treat her like a human being instead of, a child that I have control over.
I think one thing that's kind of nice about autism is being very passionate about your interests, to just really dive into something and be all about it. And it's a gift to get that much joy from something in a way.
Yeah, it can be. I also will sometimes avoid my special interests because of how hyperfixated I can get. And then it's really dysregulating for like me personally to have to step away or be interrupted or separate myself from it, even though um, like it's something that I enjoy. It can become kind of a almost a not problematic, but like I have trouble stepping away from it. And then even for my own body functions, like hunger or going to the bathroom, like I get really irritated. But then there's so many things that I'm creative and passionate about that it's brings me so much joy in my life. And without it, I notice that I get really kind of bogged down by the rest of my life, right? So like music is one for me, and I love to go out and sing and do perform and do these things with music. Um, but then sometimes the rest of my life gets in the way of that, and I notice a big difference when I'm able to do that regularly. And I notice it in my child as well, who also loves music and loves um, performing and she loves a lot of different things. And so when she's able to kind of actively engage in those things, it's a lot easier for her to stay regulated and enjoy those things that she's so passionate about. And I can see her doing a lot more with it in her life.
I can hear what you're saying in that it's kind of a double-edged sword. You can't just stay all day zoned in on your special interest, but then it's something that can bring a lot of happiness and meaning to your life.
Yes, I haven't found a job yet that will let me do puzzles all day, but if you learn of one, let me know, because that would be where I would be at, would be just sitting there doing jigsaw puzzles for my entire day.
I'll keep an eye out for the job listings. Do you have any closing thoughts or ideas that you want to leave parents with here?
I think that a lot of these things aren't just for neurodivergent and autistic children either. Like I think this can be helpful for all children, and a lot of them, they have so little control over their lives for such a long period of time, that sometimes the the flexibility is really helpful, and giving them that some control can really make a big difference for them.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it, really. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samantha Hinger. It has been a pleasure talking with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. This has been the Parental Compass by Family Education and Support Services. I am Bobby Williams. We'll see you next episode. Peace.